Guild Wars is now accessible to the top 96 guilds, which means this could be your first war in the coming days. For those unfamiliar, Guild Wars is a late game PvP style combat that rewards players with extra gems and guild coins, but is only accessible through the top guild boss scores. Based on those scores, guilds are divided into brackets and battle it out on a map divided into 6 bases, which is further divided by players. Fully wiping the opposing guild and ending the battle with the most points grants a win. Ties are settled by the entire guild's registered box CC. Win the war and you are seeded into the next bracket and don't have to push the next guild boss. For the new players who don't know where to start, I'm going to go over some attack teams, how to build those teams, and in another video, how to do defenses. Brackets are also separated into 2 groups. From Challenger to Gold 5 is Elite, and from Silver 1 to Bronze 3 is Regular. Now, the main difference between the two is that Regular only has 3 offense teams, 3 defense teams, and cannot use squad items, while Elite can use squad items, 4 offense teams, and 5 defense teams. It's important to understand where your guild falls under into these 2 groups so that you know how many teams you need to make. So, coming to the Knighthood Manager, the first thing that we need to do is buy our last attack team. I'm not 100% sure if Regular has their 3rd team locked, which wouldn't make any sense because it's regular, so you're not getting as many coins to be able to get the extra buffs and the extra attack teams in the first place. But I know for Elite, you're going to need to buy your 4th team. So you'll come over to the level 3 section. The first item is the Add Assault Team Squad. You'll buy 4 of those because there are 4 slots, and we will head over to the guild map. Go to the battlefield. You'll click on this bottom left icon that says Ready, and you will see the first of your 5 defense teams will pop up. But we're going to focus on the Assault tab here. You're going to see 4 locks at the bottom. We're going to go ahead and click to unlock. We're going to use all 4 of our items there, and then we are going to set some teams. Now, it is important to know that offense teams do not get any kind of links or association units, so that makes having gear and cosmetics that much more important here. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Bond team. Its core is going to consist of Purgatory Bond and Excalibur Arthur. This team has massive amounts of HP and is only going to work if you run all humans. Now, the next 2 slots are pretty flexible, but there are best in slot options. The first one is Terry. He's got single target ult drain, very nice stance, and his passive is going to help us kill the highest enemy HP unit a lot easier. And then the last unit is going to help keep Bond's biggest counter in check, which is Pierce, and that is going to go to Valenti. Now, the way Valenti works is that her resistance is going to cut the enemy's Pierce rate by the same amount. So Pierce has been a very common team since it is one of the oldest PvP teams. Almost everybody is going to be running Pierce on defense, especially now that they've got a very massive boost through Trader Melee, and some variants are even running King. Now, her gear is going to look like HP defense, but you are going to want resistance rolls in the middle, and you are going to want these as high as possible. Terry's gear is also going to be on HP defense. Pretty much the entire Bond team is HP defense, so this is probably going to be one of your highest CC teams, if not the highest. The only thing really bringing it down is Bond's top row, which should be a mix of crit chance and crit damage, and you could also run him on a crit damage gear like I have here. Now, if you don't have Terry or you don't have Valenti, there are a couple other pretty decent options. The first one is going to be Red Easton. Now, it is important to remember that all of the additional options, if you don't have anybody here, if you were forced to pick somebody, you need to at least make sure that they are human, otherwise the team will not work. So Easton is good because she does have a cleanse, so she is going to cleanse a lot of kind of critical debuffs that you might have on you, like a dissolve or maybe ignites. And then she does have single target ult drain. So she is essentially a pretty good Terry replacement. Her passive is only going to be boosting herself unless you are also going to be running Valenti, as this boosts only the disaster units. So the 4th slot here is going to go to Twigo. Now, Twigo, his kit is actually pretty bad. The only thing going for him are 2 things. One is his passive. He's going to increase red units' HP by 30%. That's something Bond absolutely loves since his damage scales off of HP. And then the other thing is his relic. Now his relic is another taunt, so that's going to help us protect Bond to a further extent. Since the main purpose of Bond is pretty much just to rush ults, we want to stay stanced up with either Twigo Relic, Arthur Stance, or even Terry Stance. Now his relic was one of the few relics that didn't require wind resources. So if you were to build a non-wind resource required material or relic, it should probably be Twigo. Now, if for whatever reason you don't have his relic and you don't want to run him or you didn't build him, the other, not even good, but other option is SR Griamore. Now, his kit is just as bad. The only thing really going for him is his barrier, and then his passive is literally half that of Twigo. And it says it only works in PvP. Guild Wars is PvP, so this is going to work. And then he also doesn't really have a relic going for him. So if you didn't have any options, you could run him. Both Griamore and Twigo are easy to build. They are R and SR, so mass shouldn't really be an issue there. The next team that we're going to look at is AM. Now, because defenses are run by AI, AM is going to have a very easy time stacking his passive up to the cap. If there is that single target attack coming down because of type advantage or any kind of AoEs that are usually going to be going down, his passive is probably going to be fully stacked by turn 2, maybe even turn 3. Now, another good unit that operates on the same notion is Sigurd. His passive only procs when there is a stat decrease on the enemy team, and thanks to AM's passive proccing, both of these buffs are going to be going down on the entire team, allowing you to potentially one-shot on turn 2 and definitely on turn 3. Now, the third slot here goes to one of two taunters. We have Droll. He is going to naturally make the team tanky thanks to his resistance commandment. And then, like I mentioned, he does have that taunt, which is going to keep a lot of important single target attacks off of AM, off of Sigurd. And then he does, if you get a nice merge, you can petrify somebody, taking somebody out of the match for one turn. Now, if you don't have Droll built, the other option that was good here is Chandler. Chandler also has a very good PvP-focused buff, or not buff, passive, decreases all stats on anyone who uses a skill. So the enemy team's going to be weaker all the time. He can turn off important abilities with his first attack, and then he does have that full counter as his second attack there. Whoops. The Sigurd replacement I forgot to mention. This slot used to belong to Glocks as sort of a healer, Red Glocks. His heal was pretty good. It removed debuffs at rank 1, and then it was very strong at rank 2. And then his first attack was a blockade, as long as you got the merge there. What really mattered was his commandment, because this reduced attack-related stats if anybody used a skill, two or more skills. So he kind of turned down at least a little bit of some of the important heavy hitters, and then it was kind of easy to rush his ult thanks to his passive if you really needed to hit somebody with that ruined single target damage. Now the last slot is going to go to Melascula. Now there is a green Melascula now, and she is very, very good here. Originally it was red Mela. It still can be red Mela. I wouldn't say that green is 100% better than red right now, but green definitely has a lot of high points. The reason that we ran red was solely for her passive, and that was the zombie passive. So usually what would happen on a lot of turn 1s is AM dies or comes close to death, gets hit with the revive, has time to stack up his passives, and then you will Droll taunt so that he can no longer be targeted for the most part, and then he can continue to wipe. Now with green Mela, what's important here is also her passive. Based off her lifesteal, she's going to be giving a basic stat increase to all of her allies. Now, if we take that basic stat increase up to 20%, stack it with Sigurd passive, stack with AM passive, all of these units can also now be on HP defense and still be hitting harder than they were on attack crit. Maybe not harder than they were, maybe just as hard without green Mela. So the rest of her kit is also very good, much better than the first Mela. She has a single target ult drain, and then she also has a shield for everybody. So right now, I think Green Mel is very good. I'm going to be testing her in this next war, but for the most part, a lot of people are going to have Red Mela because she is a coin shop unit. So taking a look at their gear really quickly, AM has a couple different options. The first one is going to be attack crit, and then the second one can either be some kind of combination of HP defense or HP crit. He's pretty flexible just because he does have an all stat increase. So depending on what you need, maybe you can just barely out CC the enemy if you run an HP set, or if you're afraid of getting one shot by something like a Sariel and you want to put him on HP, you know, then both of those are fairly viable options. The same I would say for Sigurd. I had a HP crit on Sigurd. Attack defense or attack crit is probably better. I haven't built those sets for him yet, just like Melly. So having both of those options, I don't even know where my crit earring went. I must have put it on somebody. Having both of those options available for Sigurd are going to be very good, especially now that we have Green Mela, like I mentioned. Droll is obviously going to be HP defense. There's not much to say here. He is the tank. He's going to be taunting, so he needs to have as much HP as possible. And then if you run Green Mela, she needs to be on HP lifesteal. Lifesteal rolls on the bottom, at least getting her lifesteal up to 100. So that's either, if you have all of her lifesteal pieces, you need to do at least 5 lifesteal rolls. And if you're running regular Mela or Red Mela, then HP defense is fine. The third team that we are going to be looking at is Glue, starting with God Liz. Now, she is probably one of the most hated units in the game, but for the reasons that she is hated are the reasons that make her so good. Now, her attack does turn it into a stun at rank 2. Her shield does block all attack stats except basic, so you're not really getting crit through this. Her shield, or her ult, is a reflect, and it is almost a full heal, and then her passive is a revive. You know, she's very annoying to deal with. There was a reason she was like top of the PvP meta about a year and a half ago. She is just a very good unit. Now, the next part of Glue is going to be Gowther. Obviously, green Gowther is going to be better than red, but if you don't have green, you'll have to cope with red. Green is going to have an attack-related buff on everybody. 7% buff up to 5 as long as everyone is a different race, which everyone will be a different race. He's got a rank up, further boosted now by a relic. Dissolve helps keep ults in check, and then he does have ult drain on his ult, so he is going to be in that second slot. The third slot traditionally does go to King as the healer. Blue King does have a Petrified to, again, keep units in check, and then he does have a pretty nice heal in scenarios where you can't get Liz ult just yet. And at rank 1, it is also a debuff remover. So he is very good there if there are reasons that you don't want to run King. The other unit that we have is Glocks. If you are running Sigurd or you're running Chandler with Droll for whatever reason, you have Glocks open. Glocks is good here since he does also heal. He is a demon, so he is going to keep that different race buff going up with Gowther. And then the main reason to run him is for his commandment. If there is a unit that you're afraid of, you think is going to get one shot, or is going to one shot one of your units, or you know, you just want to keep things a little safe on the opening turn, you can run him for his commandment. But I think King right now is a little better, and I think he also has a little bit higher CC. So if you are at the point where you're optimizing and getting everything, milking at your CC as much as possible on offense, I think King is probably the correct way to go. Now the last slot, this slot's gone to a lot of different units. Right now the best one is Chandler, if you're not using him on the AM team. Chandler isn't really a DPS, but the amount of utility that he provides to the team is insane. Decrease all stats by 7% for people that attack. His Dragon Claw does turn off a lot, or almost every important ability out there. And then he does have a stance, full counter. This is where all of his damage comes from with the Gowther passive. He is going to be hitting, he does hit quite the amount of crits. There was, because of this, if you were running Chandler Glue like this, you could run an attack crit set on him, though that is definitely not recommended. I think HP defense is still the best way to go. With this team, there is a crap ton of utility, so you're pretty much going to be able to play around almost anything in the game, as long as you play everything right. Now, before Chandler was Green Esta. Esta was pretty good because he also has a full counter stance. His attack was pretty okay. It just ignores defense. His passive does remove all of his debuffs, and then his ult is going to turn off the enemy's turn. Since it is AI, they aren't going to lock skills. They are always going to attack into Esta ult, so this does give you a free turn and a lot of time to stall. Now, if you aren't using Esta, then the slot before this belonged to Escanor. T1, more of a traditional glue style, with Escanor getting to the point where he can just one-shot a lot of units. You know, this is a very good option. Right now, he is on defense, but if you can't afford him to run, if you can't afford to run him on defense, then this is where he would belong on offense. And then the unit before him was Lost Vein, but unfortunately, Lost Vein is kind of overshadowed. He's pretty bad. He, again, is a full-on DPS. He doesn't DPS quite as well as T1, and because of that, the only other thing that could bring him to light is his kit, but his kit is just a bunch of attacks similar to T1, but definitely worse. Now, this entire team is going to run HP defense. There isn't anything different about their gear in terms of that, so that is the third team. The last team, everybody should run some kind of variation of this. This is a very important team to have, especially in Guild Wars. That is going to be Suicide. So first up is going to be Blue Fraudulent. When he dies, he's filling everyone's ult gauge. That's all there is to it. We don't care about his skills. You want to make sure that he's not geared when he's going into a battle, and you want to keep him as low level as you possibly can. Now, even at level 60, because you know you're going into defense, you're going into fully decked out units that are going to have their links, you know, him dying has never been an issue. The next Suicide unit we want to run is Liz, and the reason for this is because she's going to heal us up. She does only give us 2 orbs. We're not really worried about that, since when Fraudulent dries, we are going to get them all. It is probably a little more optimal to have her built to a certain extent, probably 80, so that she can at least tank 1 skill, since she is going to be healing everybody. If the team can tank a hit and then tank a second hit and then get healed up, they're not going to have as much damage on our Suiciders as they would if Liz died on the first turn, or the first attack. Now, the best, absolute best Suicide unit that we have right now is Festival King. Now, Festival King's Baby Wing King, I should say. It's all about his Abyss card. Now, inflicts additional damage, 60% based on the damage dealt at the start of their turn, so they're getting hit twice by this attack. If you're running attack crit with this, he does end up one-shotting almost every team in the game, I would say. He is such a good Suicide unit. I know a lot of people didn't put ult levels into him for whatever reason, but he is still a very important Suicide unit. Now, this second slot went to Esta, just because you would have him, I think he would go on the left, and then he would get his ult before King. Because you have 2 units that die, you lose a card to use. So what you would do is you would get Esta ult, and you would turn off their turn, allowing you to ult with King for free, in case they had a dissolve, or they could one-shot somebody. You know, Esta would allow your second guy here to ult. Whether that's King, if you don't have him built, a pretty popular one is Easton, because her ult is AoE, and it is Spike, so it's most likely going to crit. Hopefully it one-shots some units. She also has a relic, so she can be pretty decent to run if you have it. I don't know who would have built it, though, and I don't even know if it is useful. Increase the hero's attack by 10% of all enemies' attack in PvP. Okay, so she can have a pretty absurd attack stat. If you don't have Easton, really the only other options that you have, you're just going to have to take a look at your box and see who has an AoE ult. That's what's important about Suicide. Now, for their gear, obviously you don't want the Suicide units to have gear at all. If you're running Esta, whoever this is going to be on it. Probably HP defense so that he can survive. Depending on who you're playing into, Esta could get one shot. It's not likely that King gets one shot, but it is also a possibility. So it's pretty much your choice to run him on a HP defense, HP crit, attack crit. Attack crit is obviously going to be the highest DPS, but again, depending on what you're trying to suicide into, there is a chance that King could just die, and you want to keep their options up on the table. Now, this is the most popular array of offense teams. Depending on your defense teams, another option that you could use if you are missing or don't want to run one of these teams are the Archangels. That looks like Red Sariel as your main DPS. He is going to be on an attack crit set, and the very nice thing about him is his passive works very well in a Angels setup. Increases all Goddess allies' basic stats by the value equal to 20% of his basic stats. So, just for him existing, he's going to be buffing up everybody. The second unit is going to be Tarmiel. Tarmiel is going to reduce the enemy's HP based on the value of his defense. So he is going to be on a triple defense set. We do want to take as much advantage as we can from his passive. He does have a single target ult drain. His stance is very strong, reducing damage taken. And then his ult is AoE, and it is also a heal. The third unit is going to be Margaret. Now, Margaret is the secondary DPS. She increases her own attack by every buff, and she's going to have a couple buffs from her buff, since this is 2 buffs in 1. And then her passive is going to increase everyone's basic stats again by the amount of buffs or stances that she uses. So there is a lot of buffing. There is a lot of angel synergy there. The last slot is mildly flexible. Kind of depends on what you're running. Again, this could be God Liz if you aren't running glue, or if you have Liz built but not the entire glue team, you could put her here. You could also run Liz Hawk, the summer version. She was the defense variant. She was on that. I don't think she's going to be as good as she could be on offense, but her main reasoning is that she decreases allies' damage taken by all target attacks for 10% for every goddess hero. So that stacks up. Her first attack decreases skill ranks. Her second attack is a debuff that decreases attack-related stats. So her kit is just a ton of utility. And then if you didn't have her and you didn't want to run God Liz, or you didn't have one of the other units, you could run Green Healer Liz. Now, her main purpose is pretty much just to rush ult, hit hard with everyone else's ult, and stay topped up with her heal. Now, a very, very mediocre option that no one really uses anymore because there has been so many better teams is Ult Rush. If you don't have any other teams and you have to use Ult Rush, then it is what it is. But that does start with Lost Vein, because of Lost Vein's skill. Whenever he gets attacked, all of his skills do rank up, and his first attack, the single target, can fill his gauge by a lot, as long as you have that at least gold. The second slot here went to a Taunter, so right now the best Taunter out is Matrona, Halloween Matrona, because of her passive. If you've been using her in the Holy Relic B stages, you see how much HP she can heal from that. She has a very strong taunt, and then her single target is a buff removal. If you run into any defense teams using buffs, you can take those out. If you didn't have Matrona, the other thing that we used to use, other unit we used was Green Small DN. Her kit is much worse than Matrona's, and she's pretty much there for the taunt. The third unit, the real reason that Ult Rush is possible, is with Green Healer Liz. She's going to fill her own ult gauge. Ideally, what you would do is rush her ult, move her skills twice. You'll get her ult, and she's going to fill all your allies by 2 orbs. And then with a ranked up single target from Lost Vein, he should be able to get his skills and his ult, or you can move his skills and get them, which is why you have the taunt down, so that you can comfortably move his skills and get his ult without using his skills. This last slot used to go to Valenti. So Valenti right now is up on the Bond team, so it is sort of a flex slot if you are using Valenti. It used to be, can also be Green Merlin because she has a good shield, and then again she helps with the ult rushing strategy there. So there's a lot of ult rushing synergy there. Matrona is going to keep people off of LV while LV does try to go in for the kill. But that does wrap up the majority of meta offense teams. If you guys have any other ideas for offense teams, you can feel free to comment down below and talk about them. A lot of the teams that you might think of are potentially better on defense, so we are going to cover the defenses in another video. So that wraps things up here. If you guys like that, drop a thumbie, maybe sub if you're into that. See you in the next one.